Jetzt fliegt ein Katzenhaar von meiner Kamera rum.
Stellst du nur auf live? Ah, nee, Moment. I think we're live.
I think the first thing that I said on this stream, the first stream that we've done in a very long time, was that there's cat hair floating in front of my camera.
I mean,
Excellent.
That's a good way to start it off, I think. I mean, hey everyone! Can
Hello.
you hear us? Can you see us? So many people here already. Hello.
Nice. Nice.
Please shout at us if anything's wrong with the stream or something.
It says excellent connection from my end here.
Perfect, nice. Yay, it's working, great. Okay, then I think I can welcome you all to the stream. Yeah, so as you probably already read, the stream is about our latest project, the AirlineSim Technology Demonstrator, which is a long word. So we're going to call it ASTD. Yeah, we launched it last Friday, and now we're here so you can bombard us with your questions if you have any. And yeah, we're going to be here for about an hour and try to answer as many questions as possible. And we also have some questions prepared, like from the Q&A we had on the forum. But of course, you can always ask in the chat and we'll try to answer everything. So yeah, I think maybe we can start with some introductions. Just a quick
Ladies first.
All right, I'm already talking. Hi, I'm Lena. You might have seen me in Discord maybe. I'm the new community manager and I'm joining Martin here today and hopefully gonna read all your questions to him. Yes.
All right, and I'm Martin. You know me. You know my face from the recent video that I did, and maybe you've been around long enough to have seen me in one of our earlier videos from many years ago, or even live. Like, I mean, I think I've met some people on the chat list live. I'm not sure, maybe. Yeah, so I'm the founder and developer of AirlineSim, and I'm here to answer your questions today.
Yay! Yeah.
So shall we start with some from the backlog while the people on the chat are warming up?
Yeah, yes. Perfect. Okay.
All right, let's have a look at the list here.
Yes. So, what's a good one to start with? Do you have a favorite already?
I like Pinto's question.
Yeah.
They're like to the point about our about content. Like, what is this about?
Okay.
So I like that.
So one question from Pinto from the forum would be: will we see code shares become a thing, or more advanced version of interlinings?
Yes and no. So I mean, it's a little bit open right now. What will be exactly part of the technology demonstrator in its first version? But in a sense, the whole project is about booking systems, reservation systems, how distribution works in the real world. I mean, hence the name for this core of this product, which is the distribution system, right? So a lot of things in this prototype revolve around interlining, about giving you more control over how to interline, with whom to interline, where to interline, all these kind of things. I mean, maybe to give a little bit of background first, I mean, because not everyone has spent as much time as we have reading into this whole subject matter of how this stuff works in the real world. But I mean, I mentioned on the FAQ page that we are going to do more, or we're going to add more features and more depth to stuff like fares and fare rules and fare codes. And if you've ever looked at something like this in reality, or have actually looked at fare rules on something like Google's flight search or something, then you'll see that there's a whole bunch of fare rules that include stuff like who this connection can be booked with, via which hubs it can go, which carrier certain segments of the flight have to be on, and these kind of things, right? And to what extent we're going to be able to implement this is still open. Obviously, I mean, this is an experiment, but there's definitely going to be more to it than in the current version or current generation AirlineSim. And concerning CodeShare, I know that CodeShare is one of those big, often requested features for decades now, and we've been around long enough to say something has been requested for decades. But CodeShare is something that makes a lot of more sense in this whole thing that we're building than it does in the current AirlineSim. Whether we're going to add it in the first generation or as part of that prototype remains to be seen. So I doubt it. Like we're probably going to keep it in the backs of our heads that there is something like that, and it makes sense to have it, but most likely not in the first version.
Okay.
I hope that answers that question.
What else do we have? Should we do another one from Pinto maybe?
Sure.
Will we be able to make certain airlines get connections before others? So will there be differentiations between the connections?
Possibly, yes. I mean, as I said, there is most likely, like, take a big disclaimer here. You probably can do like probably can add a banner to this stream saying, take all I'm saying here with a grain of salt. But as I said before, or as I mentioned, there is going to be this concept of fair rules and what kind of connection a fare is going to be applicable to. So technically, it could very well be possible that you say, okay, on a connection to airports A, B, C, and D, I want to be interlining with this regional carrier, and to destinations, I don't know, X, Y, Z, I want to interline with some other carrier. So there is a very good, or there's a very high chance of something like that becoming part of the game.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And the last one from Pinto was, will we see a change in the two-stop policy for passengers?
By that, I'm assuming that he means that currently connections can at most be 2 stops or 3 legs in length, and that is most definitely the plan. Yes. So we've been doing experiments, very early experiments. I've just recently seen a connection with, I think, close to 20 segments, which is not something you want to have in the game, and it's not going to happen. But just as a fun fact, the connection limit is, or the stop limit is by no means as strict as it used to be.
Okay. All right. Yeah, should we maybe throw in some questions from the chat? I see there have already.
if there are any, let's have a look.
there are actually quite a lot. People are commenting. Any plans to start a permanent world in Classic? Oh, okay, so it's a general question for AirlineSim about short-term, long-term worlds.
I mean, policy is still the same, pretty much. We are going to continue to launch long-term game worlds, but we're just doing it on a somewhat lesser or somewhat lower frequency. I don't want to kind of give away too much, but I don't think there's going to be one this year. But I could imagine there to be one sometime next year, but we'll see.
Okay. What else I forgot? Okay. How big is the impact at the back end? Can you use the current technology, or will you switch to a new one?
Yeah, technology questions like those.
Yeah.
Honestly, that is one of those things that we are trying to figure out with the technology demonstrator. As I said before, or as we mentioned it in quite a few places, it is a prototype. Meaning that we are actually trying to see how things work, how to best achieve them. So there's whole segments of the project planned dedicated just to testing certain performance characteristics, different database backends, different hosting options. So at the moment, we have not settled on anything, and all of these things are going to be decided sometime first half of next year or something like that.
Mm-hmm. All right. And someone asked, what about implementing AI competitors where markets lack competition, and also to counter the typical exponential growth at the beginning of a new world?
That's funny. Like I
That's
think I
actually
thought
fun.
about something like this recently, because I mean we were dealing with the problem, so to speak, right
Mm.
now, and that we of course need a lot of test data for what we're doing right now. And so the thought has crossed my mind to generate these airlines artificially. And obviously, once you have them, you could let them run basically.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that just become a lot more involved and tricky
Mm.
once you actually start doing them. Like they look easy at the surface, but then you run into all kinds of issues with them.
Mm.
So not something that is on our immediate agenda, especially given the fact that I mean AirlineSim exists for the sole reason that we wanted to have real competitors and not NPCs. But I mean, we'll see. We'll see what's in the future.
All right. I got another question, which was interesting. Sebastian asked about the distribution system. So it takes account, the different needs of the passengers, and he asked if there will be fixed groups of people who have like the same parameters, like the same desires, or will it be completely random?
I mean, if it were completely random, that would be kind of dangerous, I guess. Maybe boring. That sounds a lot like noise. No, I mean there are certain probabilities that we're working with, obviously, and those probabilities are designed or will be designed to represent certain broad categories of passengers, and within these broader categories, you will have subtle differences between the passengers. So some put more emphasis on service, some put more emphasis on price. For some, the reliability or something of an airline doesn't matter as much. All these things can be different within like a general kind of category of passengers, I guess.
Okay. And will passengers differentiate between day and night flights? This was what Noodle Doodle is asking.
Possibly, yes. I mean, we are in the early stages, like very early stages right now, and our design focus at this point is really the general structure of the system, how the formulas work and everything. So we're not really looking in detail into all the possible or all the rating factors or rating components that would be possible. But day and night flying would be something fairly easy to achieve, or we could say, okay, if you have to fly a red eye, that's less attractive than flying during the day. What's most definitely coming is flight times, like so a business passenger typically is more interested in getting to a point or getting to their destination at a certain time, while most leisure passengers do not care about this as much. So this is something that we would probably add. And then, of course, you always have to keep in mind that there are, of course, game design considerations to keep in mind. Like if we overvalue all these things too much, then obviously we have a first come first serve situation again, where an airline that captures all the good slots at the good flight times kind of has a benefit over a newcomer who is not able to have the slots at these nice times. But I mean that really, as I said, this is something that we will have to look into in detail once we get to it.
It's much coming, definitely. Okay, what else do we have? We have something else about demand. Jimmy's asking, how will the demand between destinations be simulated? Still the approach to use the available point-to-point flights and distribute it with a key on other airports in the region? See, what he wants to know.
Okay, I'm not sure whether I'm getting the question in all its facets, but how will the demand between destinations be simulated? So the approach to use the available point-to-point flights and distribute it with a key on other airports in the region. I'm not 100% sure what is meant by that, but in general, there is going to be like the passengers that we simulate, they are going to have a point-to-point travel desire. Like they are somewhere and they want to get to somewhere else. But those points where they want to come from, where they come from, and where they want to go to, are not as tied to airports anymore as they are in the current version of AirlineSim. I mean, I really don't want to go into too much details here because that is really part of our current prototyping. I think Fabian, our game designer, has literally been looking at this stuff last week, so it's really hot off the presses. But it's going to be similar but better, I would say.
All right.
I mean, I hope that answers the question. If not, then please bring up the following follow-up questions.
All right. What else? Okay. Here, Christian is asking about the success of the ASTD project. So, if there's any way that the community can maybe help to ensure that it's going to be a definite success.
I don't think so. Like, the chance of the project failing lie primarily in technological limits. So we set out to do some pretty insane things, and we started the project without knowing how much or what parts of that are actually feasible, or what can actually be done. And we obviously we have a general idea of what we're doing. We're not completely clueless, but obviously there are some risks involved. I mean, and there could be, if we realize over the course of the project that some core aspect of what we want to do doesn't work, or we get it to work, but then the way we get it to work, it doesn't provide us as much of the benefits that we actually want to achieve over what AirlineSim currently does, then we would say it's not worth it, and it doesn't make sense to pursue this any further. But I honestly, I think the chances of that happening are pretty slim. Like, I mean, the things that we've been doing so far look very promising, and I'm not too worried about the project failing. It's just we want to keep that door open. I mean, it is a prototype, and prototypes
You never know.
are prototypes. It's an experimental project by design.
But still, I mean, people can try the prototype. I think we're planning to move into open development in around middle of next year. So the community
Hopefully,
yes. Hopefully can try it out.
Yeah.
And I think that'll help us as well. Okay. Should we maybe do some more of the prepared questions just to change?
Yeah. So they weren't
not prepared, but we collected.
No, so they weren't prepared in vain by those people that were.
Yes. Maybe Chat Cruise. He asked a bunch of questions, basically on the old servers. So he wants to know, if a shutdown were to occur, could you outline potential and theoretical steps or any compensation for how AirlineSim will go about this? So if any worlds get shut down, how will we do that? Or
frankly, we haven't thought about the details of this yet in any way, because for the time being, at least for the time that the prototype project is running, and most likely far beyond that, the current version of AirlineSim is just going to operate the same way we do right now. I mean, there's not going to be any changes. So if we're talking about changes or even shutdowns of existing game worlds, then we're talking about stuff happening years down the road, and potentially, we're actually discussing things that are something that people worry about today already, or people have been worrying about 5 years ago, because the old game worlds don't have that many players anymore. And there's always questions from the community asking about, are you going to shut down those servers? When is it going to happen? At what player count will you decide that they're not worth it anymore? And to those questions, the answer has always been the same. As long as those servers contribute something to our bottom line, beyond what the servers cost to run them, we'll keep them open, because from these really, really old game worlds, it's also from a support point of view, they are not the ones that make or cause a lot of work typically. The main cost driver for these game worlds is actually their hardware,
the server probably.
Hardware utilization basically, and as long as they contribute more money than what the hosting costs us, we're probably going to keep them open, and that's going to be for quite some time.
That sounds good. Okay, the next question he asks, will any changes be made to existing game world launch configurations for the foreseeable futures, like modifications to short-term worlds? I mean, I think people have been asking on the forum, like, you know, about the runtime of short-term worlds. Will it be shorter? Will there be more starting capital, etc.?
Yeah. I mean, generally, yes. I mean, we have been experimenting with different configurations in the past, and we will continue to do so. So obviously, if you have favorite configurations or configurations that you think would be interesting, then keep those ideas coming. Post them on the forums. We're looking into them, and
we see what
I don't see why not.
Yeah. All right. And the last question he asked about, like, old servers was, will there ever be an end of the line for AirlineSim 1.0? Is that in the plans after a successful rollout of an AirlineSim 2? That's also asking about the future.
also very hypothetical, and something that we have not thought about in detail. I can repeat what I said earlier. So at this point in time, right now, we have no idea when, if, how AirlineSim 1, if you want to call it that, is going to end. Technically speaking, even if we had AirlineSim 2, the same rules would still apply. Like, if we have game worlds that still contribute to the company's bottom line, then why turn them off, right? Yeah. Just don't expect too much in terms of software maintenance on those game worlds. So maybe the question can be rephrased: will we ever stop supporting AirlineSim 1? And I don't know. It's maybe at some point. I mean, it depends on so many factors on how an AirlineSim 2 is actually received. Maybe once it is out, everyone's jumping ship from the old game worlds, and then there's not even a question about shutting AirlineSim 1 down because no one's playing it anymore. So all of these things
remains to be seen.
They remain to be seen. We'll cross it. We'll discuss those when we get there.
All right. Okay, I'm just gonna look into the chat because there have been some more questions. Thanks for commenting, by the way, guys. Okay, let me see. If flights might increase in length, so meaning more stops, more legs, will also the ticket sales start earlier, say a week in advance rather than 3 days? Xavier wants to know that.
I mean, to play around with advanced booking is one of those key features that we want to build into this new system. Like, there's one of those motivations or motivating features that are desperately missing from AirlineSim 1. So definitely. So there's definitely going to be the option to decide whether you're going to sell your tickets a week before the flight takes off or a day before the flight takes off, with the latter most likely being more expensive. So we also that kind of also gives you a hint that there's a few fundamental things going to change about AirlineSim. So right now flights are booked into the system for 3 days in advance, and for the new system, it's most likely going to be a lot more than that. Current ballpark figure is something around 2 weeks, but we've been discussing options to let players decide how many weeks in advance they want to book their flights into the system. So we'll see. But the general feature of deciding when to sell tickets is definitely going to be a part of the DS. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. There's another question about a booking from Most Liked LPA. He asks, will there be a booking system of slots, like you can buy slots in advance and not with the current flight plan?
No idea. And I mean, I think I explicitly mentioned that on the Q&A page, that slots are not going to be, or most likely are not going to be part of the prototype, for the simple reason that we want to focus on the core. Like, we want to really focus on the distribution system. We want to focus on everything that is required to make that work, and not get distracted by other things. Because I mean, the slot topic is a super complex one. It looks simple on the surface, but if you really dive into it, and especially if you discuss rules for it, it becomes really hairy really quickly. So, I mean, AirlineSim has been around for 20 years soon, and we have not cracked that nut yet. So, we do have a few ideas of how to approach this, and there's also this general design goal that we're trying to achieve with a new airline sim, that we want to be able to really make stuff configurable, so that we could say, for example, we have a very realistic game world and we have a more arcadey game world, and both use different sets of rules, for example, for something like slots. So because if you use the real world rules for slots, they suck. Like these
I don't want to get into
they're,
it.
they're stupid
Yeah.
rules, and they favor monopolies, and they're really anti-competition, and there's some unintuitive stuff about them, that you cannot actually trade them, but you can
Yeah.
only get them by buying other airlines and all these kind of things. While if we want to design a game, then we would think about something like allocating slots to players in a completely different way, and do things that are possibly not realistic, but
Yeah.
really make sense for a game.
Yeah, I mean,
So
it should still be fun to play it.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, long story short, that is kind of a whole subject matter on its own, and that's why we're keeping that for later. Basically.
All right. I have a question from Slayer of the Jedi about food, which caught my attention. He's asking, are you planning on having passengers react to add-ons like premium food, seating, or simple add-ons like free bags, etc., air casino lounges, duty-free, and all that stuff?
Obviously, the whole shebang, everything.
Nice.
I mean, as I said before, we're working on the principles, like the underlying foundation of the system right now. But the idea is obviously to, at some point, have as many factors in there as possible. I mean, one big disclaimer here, we're obviously trying to add stuff that is actually meaningful, and where players have an actual means of influencing what the passengers prefer, or rather the other way around. Like a feature, like in the past with AirlineSim, we often made the mistake of adding features for the sake of having a feature, and we really try to avoid this with the new generation of AirlineSim. So we're not. So we've been, for example, one discussion that Fabian and I had was that how to deal, for example, with cancellations, right? If you have individual bookings, basically. People could decide to pick one connection over another because one is cancelable and the other one is not. But then the question is, okay, how do we decide what percentage of your passengers actually cancel the flight? And if that is for example, let's say a fixed percentage across the whole population, then this becomes a non-feature, because then every player knows exactly what the average cancellation rate is, and then they're going to set their overbooking, for example, to exactly that percentage, and then it becomes a boring feature. It's like a non-feature. So to take this example, we would only add something like that if there is some way for these values to be different between players or between airlines, or if players have some means of influencing which kind of passengers they attract, this kind of thing, right? So these are complicated, tricky design questions.
It's nitty-gritty. All right. So we have many more questions here. Let me see. Noodle has another question. He's asking, right now it isn't really possible to run an airline like Ryanair that only relies on point-to-point demand. You're pretty much forced to run a hub-and-spoke system, and he is asking whether that will change. And I think Frank wanted to know the same. Yeah, will we get rid of the need to run hub-and-spoke to be successful?
I think Noodle questions also had two parts, right?
Yeah, there was another, let me see. You just said that passengers will have a desire for direct flights, but right now they also have this desire, but it is still pretty impossible to run a point-to-point model. So,
yeah. So short answer, yes. Like it's one of our benchmarks really for the new system, that we want to make sure that different models or different operational models of airlines are possible. That said, I mean there are of course again technical limits to what is possible. The general thing with low-cost carriers is that they kind of drive the prices so low that people who would not have previously flown somewhere actually decide, okay, you know what, now it's so cheap, I'm just going to go. And then oftentimes you get passengers that maybe don't have a very specific travel desire, so they're very flexible when they fly. They don't care too much about where they're actually going. So I could imagine someone saying, "I just want to go to the Canaries. I don't care which island it is exactly, or I want to go to I want to go to Spain for on vacation. What's the cheapest way to get there?" And then that's where low-cost carriers come in. We can model some of these things, but actually, it's not just about the booking systems or reservation systems and how the demand is modeled, but this is also very much about cost structures. So this is the point behind a low cost airline is that they operate on low costs. So we first would have to enable players in AirlineSim to have a lot of influence on their cost structure, and then again, coming back to what I said earlier, to actually make it meaningful again, right? So and a low cost carrier, for example, reduces costs by not, or kind of by nagging their passengers to not bring any bags, like to really make them not bring bags. Because if you only have to handle a couple of bags on every flight, then your turnaround times are really short. If your turnaround times are really short, then you have a higher utilization of your aircraft. If you have a higher utilization of your aircraft, then one of the biggest cost component an airline can have, which is capital, goes down. And these aspects would have to be modeled to allow like a full, proper, low cost airline, basically. But yes, it is definitely the plan to allow more of that. And as I said before, so we do have the passengers are more coming from areas or certain points in an area, not specifically from airports. So to take we have a strong German audience, right? So the classic example is always Ryanair. It's always Frankfurt versus Frankfurt-Hahn. So obviously, if a passenger comes from the greater Rhine-Main area and they're really cheap, they don't have a lot of budget, then they would look at the airports in the area and decide which one is the cheapest. And then what we want to try to achieve is that when you fly out of Hahn, you actually have pros and cons of doing that. That is kind of the goal. Okay. It has to be meaningful.
That makes sense. Okay. What else do we have? Here's a question generally on a project from Luxa. How many people work on this project, and does it affect other projects? Like, is the admin tool still coming, or also a tool to add new aircraft types easier?
How many people do work on this project? Good question. So it's me. There's Fabian, our game designer. There's Lena, who's doing the community management, and today she's moonlighting as a live stream moderator. Who else is there? I mean, that's kind of the core, I guess. But in a sense that the whole company kind of works on everything with us. So you could also say it's everyone. 6 people. I mean, there's Sven, who's Sven, who keeps our servers running, right? There's probably at some point there's going to be freelancers involved for some specific stuff about like UI design or certain parts of web development or something like that. So it's a bit hard to say, but I mean the core team is 3 people at this point. Yeah.
So many people contributing. All right. Pinto asks, not about the ASTD, but will we ever see an admin panel for private servers? So I guess to add new players manually, stuff like that.
Probably. I mean, we've received some probably understandable criticism or doubts about us maintaining deadlines and whether this is going to be different with the technology demonstrator. So I kind of have to say that we since we have a pretty strict deadline and we have a schedule for how the AirlineSim Technology Demonstrator project is supposed to run, we can't afford too many distractions. Like I can sit down and just like happily spend a week or two fiddling around with admin tools for exclusive game worlds. That said, I mean, we see the problems with more and more of these exclusive game worlds popping up. That the experience for the server operators is not ideal. Let's put it this way. So I don't want to rule it out. Like I could see that some tools will arrive eventually, but
just a matter of
let's leave it at that, shall we?
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
What else? Thank you. Making options that are meaningful is very exciting. Yay. Noodle asks, with all these changes, I guess the interface will change a lot.
Yes, probably. I mean, interface is something we're going to look into mid 2022. Since everything about the game, including the interface, is going to be built from scratch, that we obviously going to add all the new stuff that we learned over the past decade or so. So it is going to be different, and hopefully in a better way. Different.
That sounds good.
I mean, one example is that for the old interface, we kind of slapped on mobile support midway, which is not ideal. Like we never, we didn't think about, obviously 15 years ago, we didn't think about what it might look like on a phone that didn't exist yet. This is different now, of course. So if we did, I wouldn't go as far as saying we design it mobile first, but we have it in the back of our minds that this is going to be something that people are going to be playing on their phones, because that's just the world we live in right now. So in that respect, things are going to be different, I guess.
Okay, so there's a lot to come. Someone asked about our video editor, who did a really good job on the announcement trailer. Okay, I think he might be here in the chat. Okay, what else? Maybe I'm gonna move back to what Jet Cruise asked. There were a little bit more questions. He asks about the features that of ASTD. So he wants to know if we have like a rough outlook of which features will be left behind, if anything will add it, like passenger and manufacturer loyalty, nesting, ability to reward travel, stuff like that. So he's asking about the features which will be part of ASTD.
Okay, so what was the first thing you mentioned? Passenger loyalty, right?
Yes,
or something like
and
that.
Manufacturer loyalty, yeah.
Passenger loyalty has come up in our discussions, but it's just basically one item on a big mind map, so to speak. So it's something that we know exists, but it's not our top priority. Manufacturer loyalty, I don't know whether he means loyalty of passengers to manufacturers. That might play a role. So I mean, there is going to be some aspect to the rating formulas based on aircraft types. I guess I'm not sure what exactly it's going to be, but something is probably going to be part of it. If he's talking about loyalty of airlines to manufacturers, that's a whole different story. But I'm guessing that's not what he means. I'm not sure. Reward miles or miles in general, this whole kind of mile collecting stuff is kind of the same as passenger loyalty, right? We don't know yet how that's going to be working. I mean, we might be generating close to individual passengers, not quite individual passengers, but close. But we're not going as far as kind of having actual people simulated. Like we're not simulating the world population and everyone has their little mileage cards. It would be nice, right? But no, we're not doing that. So we'll see. If we find some nice way to aggregate that and kind of model that on a macro level, then maybe we do it. But I don't know.
Okay.
And then I think he mentioned nesting too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Like, I mean, nesting, yes, I guess. Like, maybe not in the very first version, but definitely something we kind of have to keep in mind because it is so important. So anything nesting, overbooking, moving curtain on an aircraft, all of these things are kind of important. And if you have enough booking classes, then it also becomes very important because you kind of it depends on what you want to do, obviously. But to me personally, nesting is something that I want to see in the game. Maybe as a quick explanation for anyone who hasn't heard of that term yet, nesting just means that if you have a more expensive booking class and a cheaper booking class, and they are set at certain capacities, then once the cheap booking class runs out of seats, they cannot get any additional seats. But if it's vice versa, the expensive booking class is running out of seats and there's seats left in a cheaper one, then the more expensive booking class can expand into the cheaper ones because obviously you're making more revenue that way. Yes. So that kind of thing is definitely something that we want to do. Yeah.
Okay. He's also asking about slots. So he asks, it's mentioned that passengers will no longer compete for slots. Could you explain what the long-term solution to the slot issue is?
The passengers are not going to compete for slots.
I think so. Let me see. Wait.
I mean, probably a typo.
Airlines, right?
Probably meaning the airlines. Yeah. I'm not saying the airlines are not competing for slots anymore. I'm just saying that in the current world of AirlineSim, you run out of slots before you run out of passengers, right? Which in the real world is not the case. Like in the real world, slots are of course limited and they're usually unavailable at the big hubs. But airlines will use their slots and scale up and use bigger aircraft to create more capacity given the slots that they have, which is something that you don't necessarily have to do in AirlineSim. I mean, it's gotten a little bit better since we switched the ORS to be more price sensitive and less service sensitive. But in the old AirlineSim, it's especially the service-heavy old versions. It's often the case that there's absolutely no need to upgrade aircraft to bigger sizes because there is not enough demand to fill them, basically.
Okay. What else? He's asking something more about how you can get involved. So as we said, you will probably be able to try the prototype, and he's asking how will testers be selected? Will it be open to all premium members? And how will this fare with terms of existing server capacity to try it out? So he's asking how we can participate.
So I mean, I think early on the stream we kind of mentioned that already that we don't actually know how we're going to host and operate the new version. Whether it's going to be running on classic servers or when it's going to be running in the cloud. But part of the budget for the project is dedicated hardware, so we're not going to cut into existing hardware budgets for this new project. And the idea, the way I envision it anyway, is that anyone who has ever paid for AirlineSim can try this version. So it doesn't cost credits per day. It's not like a regular game world. I mean, it's a literal development prototype preview, so it could be reset at any time. Like you could be playing right now and in the middle of doing something, the server you lose everything. So that could definitely happen. I mean, something we're going to try to avoid, but in theory that's possible. It's meant more as a perk to our players to be able to have a preview to look into it, but it's not going to be a paid game world or anything.
Just to get your hands on it, try it out, and
exactly. Yes.
Okay.
And I mean, of course, the further the project progresses, then the more, of course, we are also interested in how the game plays and where people struggle and which features need improvement and which things work and which ones don't. But that's obviously somewhat later in a somewhat later stage of the project.
Yeah, true. He also asks, I think this might be interesting for new players, if we can expect a tutorial, not just for the ASTD, but also generally for the game, and maybe a more complete handbook Yeah.
I can let you answer that, Lena.
Yeah, I can answer. How convenient. Yeah, we're actually planning, to expand on the handbook and maybe see what we can do in terms of tutorials. I see on the Discord server, for example, many asking like, the questions that come up when you start playing. So we definitely want to improve the documentation for the game. And yeah, we're going to let you know about all the updates so you can read it and try it out yourself. Yes. Oh, I answered my first question. Okay. And the last question from Jet Cruise, I'm just going to ask it too. Could we explore the possibility of communication by AirlineSim to be translated in the game worlds where there are already existing game translations? So he's asking about the translation aspect.
Translation of communication by AirlineSim, or
yes, I think like communication that refers to the game worlds, maybe. Maybe we have to ask him how exactly.
I'm not. So I mean, if he means by that whether we are going to translate stuff like our blog posts, for example, or something like that, I don't know.
It depends.
Maybe. Yeah, it depends. So I mean, obviously, if anytime you want to put out a blog post or something, we have to wait for 8 language versions to come in provided by volunteers. Then we're not going to do that. Are we going to open means for people to contribute these translations after the fact? Maybe. I don't know. We haven't really thought about that yet. And I mean, as I said before, we're trying desperately now to avoid distractions. I mean, part of the reason why we're like actually leaving out crucial features in this prototype is to avoid distractions. And a distraction would, of course, also be me spending my time setting up some version of the website that allows contributions from other people to provide translations. So while it would be really nice to have, we always have to keep in mind how limited our resources are, and that we have to spend those resources in the most meaningful way, which is the new prototype that we're going to be working on, and not translations, as sad as that might be.
That makes sense. Okay.
Which, of course, does not mean that people cannot contribute translations for the game going forward. Like, I mean, the technology demonstrator is going to be translatable or internationalized from day one. So there's a good chance that we will be getting volunteers into translating that pretty quickly. So.
Okay. We have some other questions which were already asked beforehand. Maybe after that we can move back to the chat. Lucas wants to know, is the AirlineSim 2.0 all web-based, or is it some other form? Is it planned in some other form?
It's going to be all web-based. I mean, I'm not ruling out that there's going to be some kind of API that actually supports developing other clients, for example. But generally speaking, it should work pretty much exactly the same way that the current version of AirlineSim works.
So no 60 gigabytes of download.
No.
Okay, that's good.
We neither have the resources nor the know-how to actually develop any apps or whatever for AirlineSim.
Okay, no, that sounds good. Okay, what else? If the project fails, is there a possibility of hiring freelancers who do the work, or is it not an option? I guess it's.
I said before, given what I see is going to be the reasons for failure, if there is one, I don't think involving freelancers is going to solve those issues. If it does, then good luck to them. So yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Then one last question which I have from a Discord user. He asks, will the update be compatible with the AirlineSim enhancement suite? Do you have any info on that?
I doubt it. So I mean, all the kind of officially accepted utilities that exist for AirlineSim, they usually work in the way that they load data from pages that a player has open anyway. That's kind of the loophole that allows those tools to exist in the first place, because they're not scraping information from the servers. automatically. And obviously those depend heavily on what the game looks like and how it works. So unless the developer of those tools or this tool adjusts it to the new version, it's not going to be compatible.
Yeah.
So.
Especially since it's a prototype, probably also.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe in the future. Okay, then I think maybe we can move back to the chat. I'm just gonna skip a little back. I don't want to miss out on too much. Okay, what do we have? Okay. So many questions.
Good, great.
Yeah, it's
Keep
nice.
coming.
Are you thinking of inserting weather delays and cancellations? Ooh, that'd be cool. Like a thunderstorm.
Come again? What about?
Are you thinking of inserting weather delays or cancellations of flights, I think he means?
If so, then on a in a way, it has to be done in a way that it doesn't require players to play 24/7 just to keep their airline running. So I mean, just maybe as a reminder, AirlineSim in theory is a strategic tactical simulation. So you're playing the CEO job, not the flight dispatch job.
Yeah, right.
Meaning that if there are weather delays, they have to be in the game as something that you can prepare for from a management perspective, but don't have to actually manage once it happens, right? So one way this could work is that we kind of have a much more sophisticated way of operating or kind of actually running the operations of AirlineSim. So I mean, we have some things like that in the current AirlineSim version where if a plane is in the wrong place, then there might be an automatic transfer flight scheduled by the system to get it to the right place again. And going forward, maybe we have something more advanced that actually takes into account, okay, what does the weather look like? If a flight is canceled due to weather, what's going to happen? Do we have backup planes in some pool that then are going to be dispatched there automatically to pick up passengers that are stranded? Again, all coming back to that theme of features being meaningful. So having weather delays without the player being able to actually do something about them from a management point of view makes no sense, right? It would just be frustrating. So if we had something like that, then a player would have to have the choice. Okay, do I keep 2 Airbuses on standby for the in case something breaks or in case some flights have to get canceled? That would incur higher costs, but it would maybe reduce or it would improve my delay statistics or whatever, something like that, right?
Yeah, something.
So there has to be a meaningful decision in that feature, and then if we can find something like that that's doable and makes sense and is fun to play, then we're gonna add it. But if it's just going to be
all flights are cancelled.
we're going to pull in live weather data because we can, and now we're going to cancel flights because there's bad weather. We're not going to do that. I mean, that's kind of pointless.
Okay, I get it. Okay, Christian is asking, what basic features will be available at the start or at mid next year? I think, yeah, definitely.
Mid next year. Nothing.
Next year.
No, mid next year. The idea is basically that we're going to start open development in the most literal sense of the word, meaning that as soon as you can basically push a button to create an airline, we are going to put this thing online, right? So there's going to be because that's also kind of what I personally want for this new version, that we're going to be able to really push out updates without even thinking about it. I want to have from the get-go, I want to have a setup that allows me to fix a bug, push a button, and a new version goes out to everyone. So we don't have to wait for maintenance patches and whatnot. So I want to have that working from the first, basically from the first version. So maybe you might even be able to access the game before you can create an airline. So then it's really just, there's a page. This is going to be AirlineSim. This is going to be AirlineSim 2, and there's a changelog maybe, and that's basically it. So that's kind of the general idea, which is going to be mid 2022.
Yes.
And then obviously we're going to build on that. So from that moment on, there's a
Genau.
continuous stream of updates coming.
Keep adding, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Dux Alpha 1, I'm so sorry for mispronouncing your names, asks, I don't know if this has been answered, but will demand modeling be based on the city or the airports? So like, is it the airports or the cities competing for demand?
Based on our current plans, it's going to be places. So no, not even cities. Like it's actually going to be places.
Okay.
So if Fabian were here, he could kind of tell you that he was kind of torturing his Excel a little bit to do some experiments. But yeah, I'm going to leave it at that, and then I'm going to talk about this in more detail once we're actually sure what we're going to be doing.
Okay. Yeah.
But the idea is to completely the idea is that airports are gateways. They have absolutely no meaning in terms of demand. They're just a place where airlines or where aircraft operate to and from, and they have different conditions, and they have different sizes, and kind of they offer different services. That's kind of the idea. But where passengers come from is completely unrelated to that.
Okay. Let's see. There's more incoming. Will there be more graphic items like airplanes with liveries or airport timetables?
So what is the question exactly?
I think will there be more graphic items like airplanes with the liveries or airport timetables? So maybe he's asking a little bit more about the interface. Christian was asking it. Maybe you can specify. Gonna look for some other questions.
I'm not sure. Like it's not. I mean, depends on what he means, obviously. But not necessarily. So that, I mean, I'm not seeing us adding more visuals for aircraft to the game. Maybe like there has been this. We have like years ago, many years ago, when the aircraft profiles first made their entrance into the game, we thought about providing players with a way to kind of putting in the layer where they can define their own livery, so you can actually see your own livery in the game with different aircraft types. But that kind of, for some reason, never materialized. I'm not 100% sure why, but it just never made the cut. Probably not the highest priority item on the list. In terms of general visuals, I have a few ideas of what I would like to do. I would kind of like to make it a little bit more visuals in terms of kind of getting better feel for the world, like kind of having more dynamic maps or interactive maps, seeing your fleet on the planet, just because that kind of looks cool. And kind of gives you more of a sense of connection with your airline. But that is also something that is not necessarily a part of the prototype. It might be something that we have to look into to some extent, because we have to keep it in mind for how we're going to build the interface. But beyond that, it's a thought in my head. It's not even on paper somewhere. It's something that we might look into at some point.
Okay, let me see. There's some more questions. Will we see the ability to launch new routes that don't exist in real life, or will they have to have some sort of IRL demand?
That depends. I mean, there is. So the first question is like routes, like literal point-to-point routes. That's not even the case today. I mean, yes, our demand in AirlineSim is kind of based on real-world operations, so you can say, okay, it's real routes, but we kind of aggregate it down on a per country or per region level. So it's not particular routes. It's kind of really there's a certain amount of people that want to go from Germany to China, for example. But which route exactly is really kind of, at the moment, really only depends on the sizes of the different cities or airports in these countries. How that is going to be in the new version is kind of open. So, I mean, the initial version is most likely going to be using the same or similar relative demand sources as we do right now, for the simple fact that we don't have anything better. But we have been playing with various ideas of how we could make this better or different, more dynamic, for example. So there's always been this kind of this vision that we can kind of take a whole bunch of factors, put them in a big pot, stir them around, and we get out some kind of really realistic, authentic demand between different places on the globe. But that's kind of that's a whole project in itself, and not something we're spending too much time thinking about right now.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Okay. Will we see the ability to take airlines from being publicly shared to private? So make them.
I mean, that's decidedly an AirlineSim 1 feature. So I wouldn't get my hopes up too much for a feature like that. At least not in the near future. And that said, I think I saw some glimpses of people mentioning the stock market on the chat.
Yes. Someone asked if it will be re-implemented.
No, like it's extremely unlikely that it's going to make a comeback, especially not in its current form. I mean, that is exactly the kind of feature that I mentioned earlier, where we kind of added something because we thought it would be cool. But it over the years it has caused us so much headache, so much trouble. With people misusing it. I mean, it's always used for exactly the wrong purposes. At the same time, it's not really the kind of market we envisioned it to be. So obviously, when we built it the first time around, we thought people are going to be trading stocks all the time. We're going to have nice charts, and nothing of that ever materialized. Quite the opposite. We basically had to take out any kind of free floating prices because it was just cheating left and right. So basically now the stock market prices are reduced to the balance, or what's it called, the balance total of the airline divided by the amount of shares. That's basically what we have right now, which is really silly. And I don't see how we're going to re-implement that. I don't see how it's going to provide any kind of benefit to the players, besides transferring airlines or the control over airlines from one player to another. And that is a feature that, of course, is somewhere on our list. So it's something that we kind of see how this could be beneficial, or how this might be fun or interesting for players. But at the same time, I mean, think about it. Is that really the point? Like, is that a point why you're playing AirlineSim so you can get like a big propped up airline from someone else and take it over? I mean, it might be interesting, but it really doesn't help with all kinds of problems, like new players not finding into old game worlds because the big ones never disappear, and stuff like that. So, very long story short, not the top priority. Not looking into stock.
Not on the
stocks.
top here.
We're not looking into stock. Like, we use that in the past a lot. This is not stock sim. This is not accounting sim. This is not whatever sim.
Yeah.
But in this case, I think it really applies. Like it is something that exists in the real world, and it exists in the aviation as well. But it's not something that is should be the focus of this game.
Okay. I think we went over most of the questions. 26 viewers right now. Woo. Let me see. Okay. I think someone asked about ground networks. Are there plans to improve the ground connections so that connections between airports of the same city are more favorable, where connections island to island are less attractive?
Yes, something of that sort is definitely going to be happening. I mean, details are yet to be discussed. A lot of that obviously depends on. I mean, as I said before, we are decoupling demand from airports. So ground networks are becoming something that is kind of implicit. Like, there's always going to be ground networks, and most likely in the initial versions, for lack of something better, we are going to be working with great circle distances between those places in the world and the airports. But we do have plans, or we do have ideas for how to make this better. So we could actually kind of generate the actual travel distances. We could figure out, is there a good ground connection on these ground connections? Or like, is there a good like public transport, or is it only possible by road, or do you have to take a ferry? These kind of things. There are ways to get this data, to get this information. It's definitely not something that we're going to research by hand, obviously, because the amount of data points that we would need for that are a little bit too much to do by hand. But we might be looking into options to automatically generate stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What else? I think someone, Noodle is asking, are there any plans on upgrading an airport? Like if slots are running low, can you build another runway, etc.? So
not for the prototype anyway. It's, I mean, maybe we can kind of quickly, I think someone might have, has someone asked that? I don't know, but maybe we can take a quick detour, like a detour, and talk about scope and outlook. Mm-hmm. So I mean, we mentioned it in the Q&A that the prototype is going to revolve around the distribution system and is going to be limited to the features that you need to actually control this booking, these reservation systems, but also kind of course, to have a basic game loop in which you set up schedules, set up your inventory, set up your fares, your prices, and all these kind of things, but then also receive bookings. Like that is the kind of the least thing you need to have for AirlineSim to start being fun, that you compete against others and you have this satisfying feeling of your flights filling up. Right, that's kind of what we want to have, and that's going to be the scope of the prototype. But after that, we're not going to have a finished game yet by any means, right? So you can expect there to be several years of development with us adding the basic things that you need to make it a full-blown airline simulation game. And obviously, expanding airports, building runways, building terminals is not going to be on the list of those first features. Like as I said before, everything that we want to put into the game has to be something that is meaningful, and kind of help out the core of what makes the game a good airline management game. And there are big things to tackle there that are not part of the prototype. I mean, we discussed slots before, but I mean, I mentioned cargo. I mean, the first prototype is almost certainly not going to have any cargo in it, even though it is so important, especially because I mentioned different models of running an airline earlier. The whole cargo aspect is so important to kind of running a long distance airline compared to an airline that only flies short or medium haul, for example. And yet the first prototype is not going to have it, right? So we are going to add the features first that make the most sense and are the most important.
Okay, yeah, so focus on the the big stuff
yes.
first, the distribution system. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. One last question. Will airports have different ratings that could potentially influence your airline's image?
Come again?
Oh, is my connection dying?
I don't know. Like there's a big yellow warning banner here.
She was like, "Stop talking."
No. Okay, so something about rating factors. Okay, what was it?
He's asking, will airports have different ratings that could potentially influence your airline's image?
Whether and how they're going to influence the image, I don't know. But I'm fairly certain that the type of airport you're flying through, or kind of the facilities that exist at an airport, are going to influence the rating at some point. I mean, as I said before, there's a whole catalog of rating factors that we think would be interesting or would make sense, or that we would want to have as part of the distribution system. How exactly that's going to look like, we don't know yet. Also, of course, depends on data research. So if you want to have it realistic, that would mean, again, that someone has to sit down and research all those attributes of 4,000 something airports that we have in the game. So definitely something that I think would make sense, again, if it's meaningful. I mean, this kind of is implicit. It's automatically meaningful because I mean we all know that there is a difference between Frankfurt and Frankfurt Hahn, and even someone who's not a
Aviation
seasoned
enthusiast.
traveler knows that one has advantages over the other, right? And that is something that we would of course like to have in the game if we want to model different types of passengers. But yeah, everything at its time.
Yeah. Okay. I think we went over most of the questions. Yeah, maybe I can give an outlook too. You might have already seen it on our blog post, but we're obviously going to keep you all updated on our social media channels and on the blog and via newsletters, everything. We're gonna bombard you with posts, gonna keep you as involved as we can. And as always, if you have any questions, throw them at us. Contact us on Discord, the forums, wherever. And yeah, just to give you a general idea of how we're gonna continue. Yeah, Martin, how are you feeling? Should we do some more questions?
An encore, you mean?
I think.
Yeah, I think.
Did we miss
We,
anything? I'm gonna have to see.
I don't know. I just see this this chat stream.
Like,
I don't know. Like, there's so many
please don't
questions.
be mad.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure we have time for one or two more questions, but then we're probably going to wrap it up. But I mean, as Lena has said, please keep your questions coming.
Yes.
We're obviously going to answer them if we can on the forums or elsewhere. I think this stream is also going to be on YouTube later for
Yes, you
reference,
can
right?
always rewatch it. Yes, I think even the chat replay will be. Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, cool.
So let's see the two final questions. Just gonna try and see what we didn't have already.
Will we be able to see how passengers are connecting on our airline?
Yeah.
For example, between two cities in our network. Currently, we only see a total percentage moving through an airport. That's a question that I like. It kind of popped out of the stream to me. I don't know exactly yet what is going to be possible. I mean, I mentioned earlier that we're going to expand the time frame in which you can book flights into the system. So there's going to be a lot more data already. And we have to see which kind of data we can keep. But since we're going to be working with booking classes and fares a lot, and there might be ways for you to actually influence how much information you can extract from your network by designing your fares in some way, because I could imagine that we're going to have aggregated statistics based on fare or booking class or something like that. So if you have a fare that is only bookable on a certain connection or a certain point-to-point connection, for example, then of course if you have a counter that tells you how many people booked that fare, then you already have a pretty good idea of how people are flowing through your network. But how this is going to work exactly is yet to be seen. So it's quite open.
Okay. And okay, the last question. I think Slayer of Jedi, he's referring to previous questions. I think whether there would be realistic seating. Let me see. Was somewhere up there. Will the new version have... sorry. You say.
No, go ahead.
Will the new version have better ability to fit realistic seating in the aircraft design? So he's asking about seating and removing galleys, I think. What was there?
Mm-hmm.
At bathrooms?
I don't know yet. Yeah. So it's, I mean, the current version of AirlineSim has some degree of freedom in how you design your cabins. I cannot imagine that once we're adding that to the game, that it's going to be less advanced. I mean, obviously, in a very early version of the prototype, we're probably going to have some kind of placeholder for this, which is going to be very similar to what we had in the past. You basically just select a few numbers and that's it. But what the cabin editor is going to be or going to look like in the future, I don't know. It's we'll see.
Yeah, something we're gonna the future will tell.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think we covered as much as we could.
Yeah.
So, thank you guys so much for watching. Should we say it? Hit the subscribe button? No.
Yes, of course. Yes, I mean we're on our path to YouTube influencing.
Yes.
So
hit the
yes.
notification bell. Give us a no. Okay, I'm just gonna stop right here. Yeah, thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you for your many questions. We're gonna stay in touch definitely.
Yes.
Cheers to everyone.
Yes. And because I assume that this is going to be the last or first and last live stream of this year, happy holidays to everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Happy New Year. Because I think we're close enough to that to actually say that now.
True.
And I'm fairly certain that we're going to repeat this kind of thing
in the future.
Going forward. Yes.
Yeah. To keep you updated.
All right.
Okay,
so
good then. Water. Cheers to you.
Yes, and see you soon.
See you very soon. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.